All right, man. What's on the menu?
Two things I want to chat about today. I don't know if we'll get to the second one because in the first one it will be a lot that we can talk about. I mentioned it to you before. I kind of want to talk about the pathway to pro. I know that we say obviously not everybody's going to make it to pro. Obviously, not every subscriber or member to the 343 program is not looking to go pro. But I think there are a lot of kids out there, a lot of parents that want that for their kids, want to help support their kids in the best way possible. I know that the pathway to pro has changed a lot over the last 10 years. Specifically, I can remember when I was growing up in the era of the OSC Rage team that we always mention on the show. Back then, the path to pro was, you play club soccer, you find a good D1 school, enter the MLS draft, and that was basically the only way to become a pro back then. I know that's changed a lot over the years now. And so I kind of wanted to get your take on what has changed. What are the other pathways that are available? Because again, not everybody's going to be going D1. And even with this new idea or new concept of USL implementing promotion relegation, is the pathway going to change even more in the next 5 years? Even if it's not a real, true promotion relegation system, is this still going to open the door for the next generation of kids to become pro? Let me just focus in on one specific question. Somebody commented on the last episode. They're like, "Hey, Benny, I love the show." They're like, "Try and ask Gary one question at a time," because you know me, I'm always fucking asking you like 15 questions. So just to start, Gary, what has changed in the past 10 years in regards to the path to becoming pro?
Yeah, well, you nailed it already with the opener. That it used to be club soccer and club soccer. I mean, well, you're saying 10 years ago. 10 years ago is 2015. So we still had the U.S. Soccer Development Academy, and that meant that there were already some MLS academies playing. Okay, so let me rewind 20 years ago first, and I think you pinned it down, which was good club team, and the club teams, there were no MLS academies back then, so a good club team, and then you have to maybe get to the regionals, or the state championships, right? You get to the state championships and get deep into the state championship for youth club soccer, and that's where all the college scouts would be: UCLA, Stanford, Virginia, North Carolina, you name it. And they start taking note there. And then obviously, if you get to regionals because you became a state champion, everybody in the nation already knows, okay, whoever's on these teams, like, they're all D1 college players for the most part. And so that was the pick of the litter sort of thing. So that's how it existed. You go to a Division One school, and hopefully you make it deep into the NCAA tournament, right? So you also had that filter, because if you didn't get into the NCAA tournament, you probably weren't really being looked at by MLS. But if you got into the tournament, all of a sudden MLS starts taking a look at, okay, who are the guys who are here? And if you go deep, maybe you get into the final four of college, then all of a sudden MLS is like, okay, definitely we're getting like a dozen guys from the final four, and so on and so forth. So those were the two main filters. That all started getting eroded with the advent of the U.S. Soccer Development Academy in 2007 when it launched. And when it launched, that's when the first MLS quote unquote academies started participating as well. And since that was a closed ecosystem, the very first of its kind, where there is no promotion relegation anywhere, and a gatekeeper got introduced as to who gets to participate in the US Soccer Development Academy, that already fucked everybody else over. Okay. There was no path to being noticed by Division colleges all that much anymore. So there were no surprises. So the path through college started getting a little bit eroded in that one step for that reason, and also for the reason, since there were MLS academies, MLS obviously was starting to try to start a farm system to get their own players from their own youth teams instead of going the college route. Fast forward another bit of time, and now it takes us to 10 years ago, Benny. So now we're talking about 2015. College soccer has fallen off a cliff insofar as how relevant they are. Yes, there's still a college draft, but the vast majority of players who get drafted end up not getting contracts by MLS, or the vast majority of players who get drafted and manage to get some sort of contract by MLS don't really last all that much because MLS's intent or focus started shifting more towards elevating and promoting their own farm system, the academies. And to a certain extent, that is correct because imagine you get drafted from college, you're a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, you're already in that older age bracket, or 22-year-old even. Whereas, and that's kind of late in global football to get your first taste of professional soccer. So it kind of makes sense to debut them and get them into the professional scene earlier, say age 18 or 19 or 17 even. And that's only possible really through the professional player farm system, the academy teams. So college started dropping off even more. And so if we fast forward even further, maybe go up to 2019, 2018, that got exacerbated when it became abundantly clear that homegrown MLS players from their academies were not getting a lot of playing time. Sometimes they weren't getting any playing time. And the vast majority of them who would get a little bit of playing time, they would not be elevated sufficiently to become permanent professional players. So they might get a season or two and then they're shipped off to a USL team, or their contracts are not renewed, or they just rot on the vine and die, Benny. So the whole farm system, the whole homegrown thing was falling off a cliff because MLS would not play their youth, and it was a death sentence. And so homegrown players, instead of signing homegrown contracts, started looking for alternatives. And they're like, you know what? This is ridiculous. How about I try to follow the path of Pulisic, or how about I try to follow the path that McKinney seems to be on, a good one, So this takes us to 2018, Ben. And in that year and in 2019, a huge cohort of MLS Academy players said, fuck this. I'm not signing with my MLS team. I am going overseas and at least take a crack at the Pulisic roadmap. That forced a huge shift by MLS. It forced them to say, holy shit, we have to be different than what we've been doing. We can't, this is wrong. We can't do this. We're going to start playing our youth, start playing our homegrowns. And from their vantage point, it's like charity because they never believed in any of these guys. They never believed that a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old or a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old can actually be an important piece to a professional MLS team. But they were forced into it, Benny. And as a consequence of them being forced into it, that kind of forged the path that we're currently on, which is, hey, you want to be a pro here in the United States, you want to get onto an MLS team, you have to be part of their farm teams, because they were also forced into selling players because they would never sell players. Even the few exceptions, Benny, that would kind of make it on an MLS team, when Europe would come calling, when Mexico would come calling, when anyone would come calling to purchase them or whatever, MLS would shoot it down, torpedo. So the player would, again, rot here in MLS and die and never have a European opportunity, an overseas opportunity. This 2018, 2019 forced them to change, and they started doing and participating in the transfer market and started selling some of their youth guys overseas to kind of signal to their academies, no, we will play you, and no, we will sell you, and no, we will satisfy your dreams. So all of this happened 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022-ish, but now they're reverting back to their old ways, Ben. So that's kind of the path to pro as it has evolved from the MLS perspective. But I'll let you jump in here because now we have to talk about the US path also, or USL, the USL path.
Right. Just one quick question on that, backtracking. How you said that like Europe would come calling to these young academy players. How would the MLS like torpedo these deals? Would they just say, no, you can't go? Would they make it like a shocking deal that the European clubs are never going to accept, or what would it look like?
The second one more than anything else. It's kind of like Stuttgart would come around and say, hey, you know what? We like Chris Durkin from DC United. We'd like to purchase him off you. Like, what are you thinking? And they'd be like, oh, $38 million. I'm being hyperbolic. Okay, obviously. It wasn't $38 million I was being asked, but it was something ridiculous for at the time for an 18-year-old, or I think he was 18, 19-ish. For that, yeah, for an 18-year-old to be worth X amount playing in America, where there was no proven track record of it translating to the European game. And it's not like he was a superstar phenom at all. He wasn't Lamine Yamal or anything. He was just a defensive midfielder who would, do some tackles and distribute short range passes. And that was it. That was his job. So it's nothing fancy, and it's not a position that goes for a lot of money anyway. But it's just a case study of many, many situations where they would come, they say, we like this player. MLS, because DC United doesn't have the say, or LA Galaxy doesn't have the say, or Houston doesn't have the say of we are selling this player. No, all the contracts are owned by MLS. MLS has the ultimate decision-making power of whether a transfer happens or it doesn't happen. Okay, so they would just say something stupid for a transfer deal, and that effectively torpedoes anything from happening.
Right. So when they got rid of the DA, Gary, and now they have things like ECNL, MLS Next, was that just a way of kind of protecting themselves from not having to play the players? Or why do you think they got rid of that in the first place?
So they got rid of, you've heard the expression of never let a good crisis go to waste. Okay. And if you haven't, you heard it for the first time here. So we had the pandemic. That's a crisis, global crisis. And MLS basically controls US soccer. It basically controls the federation. It has regulatory capture over the federation and all the decision makers in the federation, from the US soccer president on down. They're all compromised. They're all MLS's bitch. Okay. And so when this crisis hit, MLS took the opportunity to say, okay, you know what, US soccer, you're going to shut down the development academy, and we're going to take over the entire youth pipeline, the entire youth system. And, the public facing message from US soccer is like, oh, look, we're in financial turmoil here. We can't do anything. So, I'm sorry, but we're just going to have to let the development academy go and fold because we just can't handle the finances there. Fucking nonsense, Benny. All bullshit. And then so it was, the keys to the kingdom were handed over to Major League Soccer. And yes, to kind of answer your question a little bit more directly, it's to consolidate further power for themselves and to control the path to pro and to control the youth marketplace now.
That's crazy, Gary. I've never heard it explained like that, but when you say that, it makes so much sense as to them taking over the power from US soccer, and now they can basically control the entire pipeline.
Yeah, US Soccer's charter, the federation's charter, is to look out for the best interest of all its constituents. And all its constituents include the youth game, right? The youth game, youth players, the youth families, the non-MLS leagues, be it USL, USL League One, and PSL and ASL, just name them. Whatever league, whatever soccer enterprise exists in the country, they're supposed to be looking out for their best interests as well. And they have completely turned a blind eye to their charter, to their responsibility, and they are just MLS's bitch. That is what they are.
Yeah. It's kind of sad, Gary. We've been talking the last 20 minutes about the path to pro and what it takes. And I mean, really, we've only talked about like the politics of it and how to get into these things, but we haven't even mentioned like how good are you as a player, or what special talents and qualities do you have, so it just goes to show you like it's more than just you have to be a super phenom. You have to kind of jump through hoops, and it's crazy, dude. It's crazy.
It's so bad. It's so bad, but it gets so much worse than this. I'm keeping it light for the this is a family show, kid show.
Nah, dude. Hey, when I upload to YouTube, it says, "Is this made for kids?" I say no, so feel free to
Okay.
let loose, man.
Yeah, there's just a lot of things when you actually work in the space and work in the business and have all these engagements with folks that work in the space, work in the sphere at a whole, all the levels. You get to see and hear how the sausage is made, because you're part of the sausage making. And there's just stuff that, irrespective of ethics and integrity and things of that nature, irrespective of all of that, you can't divulge stuff, right? You can't say publicly things that are setting confidence, number one. And you also can't divulge things that you're contractually kind of obligated not to divulge. And even further, if you want to be in the business or any business really, you can't go out airing all kinds of dirty laundry either. You have to pick and choose what it is that you say. And as much as folks like to say, you're crazy, Gary, you say way too much, and this is the reason that, MLS doesn't really like you or US soccer doesn't really like you. The things I could fucking say, my God, I'm keeping it PG. This is PG. It's not even PG-13.
Yeah. Well, Gary, that's the beauty of being an independent. You say whatever you want, and you know, maybe you
Yeah.
do have
Yeah.
repercussions of your business, but at least you're keeping your integrity, dude.
No, but unfortunately, I just admitted to you that I'm not fully independent.
No, I know, but I'm saying you could be.
Mm.
You could be.
If yeah, maybe one day I will be. Maybe
Yeah,
one day I'll be
for
like,
sure.
I'm completely out, and guess what? Then I have no more chains.
Right, for sure. All right, Gary. Well, obviously, we've heard a lot about what the pathway used to be, but okay, now let's say I'm a parent. I have a 10-year-old son. He's been recognized by a lot of coaches. A lot of people have told me that he has potential. He's, the top player on his team. Do I need to get him into like an MLS next team or an ECNL team at the age of 10? Can he, play with because Gary, let's face it, a lot of people in the US, they don't have an MLS next team near them, or they don't have a good ECNL team in their area. Maybe they have to drive an hour away or 2 hours away. So do they need to start being on those teams at that age? Or can they be still playing with, a local top level club team? What's the current pathway?
Yeah, I think remind us to circle back to complete the pathway to pro with USL, because USL is a big player in this now too. But with respect to the youth player, it's what you said in your second comment there. You don't have to go to quote unquote the top gatekeeped leagues quite yet at age 10. Stick with your local club if you have a great situation going. And what do I mean by a great situation? Your coach is very good, your kid is happy, and you see improvement over the course of the seasons transpiring insofar as skill, insofar as enjoyment of the player, insofar as, yeah, just the level of the kid. Is he improving? Is he not? And is he having fun? And is your coach really, really good? You stay there, man. You stay there unless for some reason you are 100% sure that those same things are going to exist in whatever else you are contemplating moving to, which is a difficult proposition because how can a parent say, well, if I move to this other option, the coach is really, really good. How do you even know that? Especially if you're not a coach yourself or you don't have deep subject matter expertise. How do you know that coach is actually really, really good? Because stats and pedigree and all those sorts of things are all superficial and it does not tell you whether they are good or not. So that's number one. Number two, how do you know if your kid is actually going to have the same high level of enjoyment he's currently having if you go over there? And these are all uncertain variables. So I would say don't have the idea in your head of, it's always greener on the other side. Don't look for greener pastures if the pasture you're currently on is already green. But perhaps once they are, 14-ish, 14, 13 years old, 14 years old, and if your kid is truly at that level, then that other path should be given more consideration. Because unfortunately, as things stand right now, as we just finished this discussing, there's a monopoly that exists that controls the pathway to the higher levels. And if you're a parent, how are you going to combat that? You kind of have to bow your head, bend the knee, and say, well, like, that's the pathway. So I have like no choice but to kind of go down that route. If the kid is good, Benny, because you'd be making a big mistake if the kid is not as good as you think they are, and then they go over there, you might be on the bench, you may never play, your situation might get worse.
How do you know if your kid is good? Especially if
Yeah.
you didn't play soccer yourself. Or let's say you have a coach that's a clown and is telling you like, "Hey, this kid, he's gonna be the next Messi," you know?
Yeah.
How do you do it?
Yeah, so such a difficult question, Ben. I think there's a few routes to take. Number
Because
one,
Really
It,
quick, Gary,
it
because
yeah.
I feel like how many emails, Gary, have you gotten from parents saying like, "Oh, my kid can make it pro. Please watch his highlight video." Like, so many people out there have the idea that their kid is gonna be the next superstar, and it's just 95% of the time, it's not the case, Gary.
Well, that I think that's already one sort of guidepost is that the probabilities are vastly against you. The probability that your kid happens to be the one that is like top professional level caliber player, the probabilities are very low. So there's already that to maybe consider. Like you might think your kid is really, really good, like, oh my God, top of the food chain. Probabilities are against you. Okay. Probabilities are that you're probably not correct. Aside from that, because you always want to err on the side that benefit of the doubt, give the kid the benefit of the doubt that he actually could get there. If that's the case, I mean, okay, so one possible modality is if they are that good, it's highly likely that somebody's after you and trying to recruit you from an ECNL team, from an MLS Next team, from an academy, from somebody with a lot of prestige or whatever. That's probably a signal that, okay, maybe, maybe there's something there. And if that's the case, how about guest playing for that team that's trying to court you first? Say, oh, okay, cool. Like, can I guest play for you and go test the waters over there? And then if you guest play, that gives you a nice little testing ground to see how good you truly are. Not only in maybe your the training environment, because maybe you can, even if you can't go compete on the team in a tournament or something like that, maybe go and ask, hey, well, can I train with your team? And then your kid and you are going to find out if you stick out like a sore thumb because you're not as good as you thought you were, or if you go there and you're like, oh my God, I'm still the best player on this team, even. So I think that's a very, very good first step in discerning whether you're equipped for the next level. And you're going to have to chime in here, Ben, because guest playing when we were involved in the youth game was a certain way, and I don't know what it's like now.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Gary. I think if you're good enough, you're gonna have teams after you. You're gonna have other coaches from other teams that you play coming up to you after the game saying, "Hey, we want you on our team." Today, Gary, I think guest playing is not the same as it used to be. I think it's now more of trophy hunting. And let's say a team's going to a tournament, not even they'll go to look for a kid from another club, but they'll pull somebody from within their own club, not to recruit them on their team, but to have success at that tournament. That way they can start to say, or even post on their social media, Gary, oh my gosh, we won Surf Cup. Come join our high level Flight One team. When the reality is they didn't even have their own players playing with them. So that's more so what guest playing is these days.
But for the context that you're proposing, that's still a possibility. That doesn't detract from the kid going and guest playing, especially if they're trophy hunting, like you're saying. Then they
Right.
would want your kid.
No, for sure, for sure. I gave the example of coaches pulling from within their own club, so they're not really trying to recruit that kid, but I think you're right. I think there are instances where, you see a kid at a tournament, you invite him to come play a couple games with you, and it it can still be a recruiting tool like that. And again, I think if your kid is a high level player, there's going to be a lot of opportunities, and you're going to be getting calls and texts from other coaches, even like other parents from the other team will like hunt you down and say, even if they're not trying to recruit you, they're going to say like, "Hey, your kid is amazing, and maybe next year you come play with us," or things like that.
Yeah, yeah. But nothing beats the actual club, the actual coach
Right.
coming and trying to get you,
For
because
sure.
parents fluff each other up. Man, parent A might think parent B's kid sucks ass, but they'll tell parent B, "Oh my God, your kid is really good." Blah 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 blah.
Johnny had a great
This
game today.
Johnny had a great game. Oh my God, I don't know why they don't play him more.
Yeah, seriously. That's funny. Okay, so Gary, as we talked about 10-year-olds, 10 to 12 maybe, as they get a little bit older, when do they have to start joining those gatekeeping leagues? And you mentioned bring up USL as well. So I don't know what would be the appropriate age to start looking into those academies. And kind of like what we just mentioned, Gary. I mean, I think most kids are on an MLS next team or an ECNL team because they've been recruited to go play on those teams, not because, they've I don't know if those teams even host like tryouts, or maybe they do like once a year as kind of like a money grab, but you know, do you have
Yeah.
to is getting recruited the only way?
I think it's the best way because that's the one that actually gives you the correct signal. I also
Right.
believe that all this stuff where folks host tryouts at the higher levels, okay? I'm not talking about the regular old levels. I'm talking about like quote unquote tryouts at the highest levels. Most all of that is a scam. Most all of that is nonsense. And most all the players who show up there aren't the highest level caliber materials. And I understand why you go and do it because you're taking your shot. You're shooting your shot. You're like, you know what? Let's give it a go. It doesn't really hurt. Yeah, I might have to pay $100 or 300, whatever the heck they're charging. Give it a go. But the fact of the matter is, if you are not being recruited by the top level teams or whatever, it's not great news for you.
Right.
And regarding the age, I mentioned it when I opened up that age 13ish 14ish, if you're truly top level, then it's maybe time to unfortunately go to those gatekeeping sort of leagues,
Yeah.
unless I mean, there's another pathway, right? But it's just more difficult unless for some reason there's folks with influence, power, connections, network in your circle, and then you have that other possibility. But if you don't have somebody like that, then it's probably difficult for you to get noticed, um, say overseas, or or be recommended for a youth national team ID camp or stuff like that, because a lot of those things come through recommendations, and so you might make it into those other ID camps or get those experiences or opportunities via recommendation, not necessarily because you're playing in the top league.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense, Gary. A quick side note, I know you mentioned like the ID camps at the highest levels. I think like college ID camps are the biggest scam on earth, Gary. Like $250. And like I seen a post where this player like gets an email from a college coach and it's like, hey, I saw your highlight film. I really liked, the way that you play. Come out to our ID camp, $250. And they found out that, like, this coach sent, like, a mass email to, like, 1,000 players with the same email, you know? I think if a college coach really wants you, they're not gonna be inviting you to their ID camp. They're inviting you on a fucking private tour, courting you, doing anything that they can. They're not sending you to an ID camp, you know? Do some kids maybe get picked out of ID camps? Maybe, like, 1 out of 100, but, you know, such a scam, dude. And I think
Yeah,
college
yeah,
coaches, they won't say it, but they'll agree for sure.
yeah, dude. We're all about identifying the scams here on 343, dude. The whole ecosystem's a big fucking scam, Ben. It's not
Yeah,
we don't have a meritocracy, unfortunately. But we say promotion relegation to the end of the episodes.
yeah, exactly. Ignoring all of the politics, Gary, the gatekeeping, which team do you have to join? At the end of the day, Gary, I mean, what does it take on the field to become a pro? At the youngest of ages, what should they be showing on the field? As they get a little bit older, what does it really take as a player? Like, forget about, which team are you on? What do you need to become a pro? And what did you guys recognize in all of your guys' players that went pro? What did you recognize that they had that other players didn't have? And by the way, Gary, I don't know if you saw this comment. Somebody commented like, "Oh, Gary, you've been coaching." Obviously, this guy doesn't know. He's like, "Gary, you've been coaching 20 years. Like, why haven't you ever produced a pro, or why haven't you ever sent a player to the national team?" I'm like, "Come
Yeah,
on, dude. Do a little research." But
yeah. What does it take, Benny? Well, Ben, I've written over 300 articles. We have thousands of hours worth of audio here through the podcast. We have thousands of hours worth of video. We have um, you know, premium programs online, free programs online, and we have 2 decades worth of working and talking about the question you just asked me. It's all surrounding around the question you just asked me. And so you're asking me to condense it. It's impossible, dude. I think to this day, I haven't come up with a better categorization that I don't know who invented it, but it's out there. Better categorization than the four buckets of the technical, the tactical, the physical, and the psychological buckets. So you need all four of those things, and you kind of need to have them, all four of those things, at like the top percentile marker. So, from a technical perspective, you need to be among the best in the country from a technical perspective. What does that mean? Do you have to be top 10 in the country? No, but maybe, I don't know, top 5,000 in the country potentially, or top 10,000 in the country of the millions of players that exist. Maybe you have to be top 10,000 in the technical. On the tactical side of the equation, maybe also be among the top 10,000 players in the country who truly, when you're on the field yourself, you have great awareness of what is transpiring all around you, uh, with the ball and off the ball, and have a soccer IQ to understand what are right decisions, what are wrong decisions, and obviously have the technical chops to execute the right decisions in under a variety of contexts. So you have to be maybe top 10,000 in the country to do that. On the physical side of the equation, again, do you have to be a super athlete? Thankfully, in soccer, you don't have to be a super athlete like a LeBron James, like a basketball player, where you have very specific physical attributes that you have to kind of fall into. Otherwise, you'll never be an NBA player. So maybe you don't have to be top 10,000 from the physical perspective. Maybe you have to be top 100,000 from a physical perspective, where, hey, you actually are athletic, right? You actually could run, you know how to run, you know how to jump, you know how to do these sorts of things, and you don't look like a clumsy, uh, nerd trying to be athletic. So the requirement on the physical side is lower, and then on the mentality psychological side, I separate it into two pieces. There's the youth piece and there's the pro piece. And because on the pro piece, now you have a job. It is literally a job like any other job. So on the youth piece, do you have to be very strong psychologically, mentally, only to the extent that it drives you to work hard enough to continually get better in those other three areas. Because you don't have to necessarily have such powerful, potent mental fortitude to confront adversity and obstacles at the youth level. Because if you already have those other three components, you're probably among the best of your team. You're probably already among the best in the league. And so your playing time is always like through the roof, relatively speaking. And so you're not challenged all that much mentally in your youth club environments at the youth level. So you don't get exposed as having a deficiency on the mental side. When you get to the pro game, all of a sudden, all of that changes because everybody at the pro game has those other three things. They have the technical, they have the tactical, and they have the physical. So now a huge differentiator more than anything else is the mental side of it. Can you actually handle it? Can you hold down a job when things are going bad, when things are going worse, and when things are going good? Are you in chill mode and saying, I'm good, I'm the starter, I don't have to keep working hard or anything? If you have that, you're so fucked because the guys below you and around the world are all competing for your job and they want to take it from you. You can't relax. So, Ben, that's what it takes, man. That's what it takes. And for the folks out there, if you have a youth player in mind, or maybe it's your kid, or maybe you spotted somebody or something, it's really tough, in my opinion, to know whether they are the top 10,000 or the top 10,000 in the country. If is this 11-year-old kid top 10,000 in the country technically or tactically? That's difficult, right? Because obviously you can't line up all the players in the country and then judge. Of course, I think it takes a lot of experience. I think it takes a lot of pattern recognition, which comes with experience. I think it takes a lot of history and heritage and culture on your part where you developed your eye for football since you were very, very young. I think it takes you having been a practitioner for a very long time. I think takes you having been a practitioner through a variety of cycles where you've seen youth players from age 9 complete their youth cycle and see where they all turned up, and having done that multiple times, for then you to sit down and watch a game and say, holy crap, that kid number 8 right there, top 10,000 in the country for sure. And yes, people might say, oh, Gary, at age 10, you have no idea, whether it's pro material or not. Yes, we do. And yes, people around the world do. Will that kid make it as a pro? That's another story, because all the other things come into play. The politics, the gatekeeping. Are you on the right team? Is the right network of people around you? Uh, do you have the mentality, as I just finished describing? Uh, did you get derailed at age 15 or 16 because girls, I'm speaking about boys soccer, obviously, or did you get derailed because all of a sudden you have a driver's license and you have freedom and you like your freedom more than something else? Did you get derailed because your circle of friends do drugs and you started doing drugs? Did you get derailed because of a million possible things that can derail you? But can you spot an 11-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 16-year-old and say, that is a pro player potential and has everything you kind of need? 1,000,000%.
Yeah. A lot of things can derail a player, Gary. I want to circle back to the phrase that you mentioned, like having a job mentality when they do become a pro. But before that, and I know this is a case by case basis, Gary, and every situation is different. But generally speaking, how much involvement did the parents have in those players that became pro? Were they there at every single practice, talking to Brian after training at every single game? Were they taking their kids to the park when they didn't have training and helping them out? Or were they kind of more in the passenger seat and letting Brian kind of shape and mold them? Obviously, not every parent in the country has a coach like Brian, so again, every case is going to be different. But generally speaking, from what you witnessed in the players that did become pros, how much involvement did their parents have?
I think generally speaking, the parents are involved. Generally speaking, the parents have some sort of soccer heritage and culture with them. Yeah, those two are the biggest factors, generally speaking, and to varying degrees. This is a huge topic, Ben. Um, is that always the case? Absolutely not. We know it personally, right? That there are players that did not have a single parent involved at all, and they became professional soccer players. No, yeah, without an issue. And then there are players who have had a huge parent involvement, and that derails their professional playing trajectories. And there are players kind of like in a sweet spot where they also became professionals. Then so it runs the gamut, but you asked me generally speaking. So generally speaking, yes, the parent is involved, and generally speaking, I would say there is some sort of soccer heritage and soccer culture there.
How involved though were those parents? Was it like, again, every single training that they're there on the sidelines, giving advice to the players on the car rides home, or because you
Yeah.
mentioned on the other end, a parent can maybe become too involved and derail their kid's career, So how do you find that balance of helping your kid onto the path? I know it's extremely hard and a tough question to answer, but I think it's important because, Gary, think about how many potential pros there could have been, but their parents were just too overbearing, too demanding of the coach. Maybe they jumped them from team to team like every year. And, I think a parent can really derail their kid's career. But at the same time, you don't
Yeah.
want to be like, not there for the kid or not supporting them.
Yeah, man. It's such a tough question, Ben, because you already said it. It depends on so many variables. It depends on the context. Some kids are very receptive in the long run to having a parent that is on their ass all the time, right? And is telling them what to do, what not to do from a soccer perspective, and is that level of crazy engagement with the kid from a soccer perspective. Some kids respond to that, man. Um, so for instance, Efra, we all know Efrain Alvarez, plays at Cholos now. he has a family that is a footballing family. The father was a footballer growing up. I don't exactly recall if he became pro. I don't think he was not a pro, but like really good. Okay. He was at all the games. He would be very vocal during the games, on the games, but not as much as he would like to be, the father, because he would defer to Brian, right? It's like, hey, Brian, like you're in charge here. You do with my kid as you want, because he recognized Brian's depth and richness of knowledge and capability and all that sort of stuff. But you best believe he was on Ephra's ass, the father. And his older brothers, were professionals. They played pro, so they have this heritage there. And when the kid was growing up, imagine, Brian had one of his older brothers, Carlos Alvarez, very briefly, at age 18. And so, Ephra would come and get involved in the training or in the scrimmage or in the games. And Ephra at that time was maybe 10, and surrounded by 18-year-olds. And the older brothers were on his ass too, like hardcore. So a kid like Ephra kind of responded to that environment. But if you do that to another kid, they will shut down and get absolutely annihilated and destroyed, and they will never become a pro. So I don't know, Benny. I just bring up that because it came to my mind. There's such a variation in responsiveness of the player that I can't give general advice of how involved the parent should be. And keep in mind, if a parent doesn't have a soccer culture, soccer expertise, what are the chances you're giving good advice to your kid? I don't know. Maybe it's great advice. Maybe you were a former basketball player, football player, so you're looking at it from a purely competitive point of view, and you're developing your kid from that vantage point. And there's a lot of commonalities, and you know what it takes to be among the best in basketball or football or baseball. And there's a lot of commonalities to being the best in soccer. But are you able to talk to them about tactical situations and what are good decisions on the field? What are bad decisions? Are you capable of identifying what is good technique, bad technique, what he has to, I don't know. That's very difficult. So I don't know how to answer your question, Ben. It's challenging. Should a parent be involved? Yes. In what capacity? Generally speaking, I would say make sure that the kid is having a good time. But what I mean by that is not to be fucking soft and not expect your coach to be soft and not to expect the club to be soft and not to expect playing time to be gifted to them because, that'll make the kid have a good time. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying be supportive, right? Be warm and don't be another thorn in the side of your kid if they're going through struggles in soccer. I don't know, Benny.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I would say 75% of youth players, their parents have probably never played before in their lives. And sadly, it's this whole like expert syndrome. Everybody thinks they're an expert in it. And so the advice that these players are hearing is from the parents who have never played the game before, and it's just the general things that maybe seem to be obvious in soccer. For example, like especially here in the US, launch it out of the back or don't play it back in front of the goalie, you know? Like simple things like that. And so sadly, these players are getting advice from their parents. And so that's why I think it's so important for, especially if your kid is, obsessed with the game and loving the game and has that goal to play at a high level, like, if you're the parent, I think you really need to spend time educating yourself. Or if you don't have time to educate yourself, then leave it to the coach to shape and to mold your kid, because you say one thing to a kid, especially if you're the parent, that kid is gonna, like, take that with them and hold it forever. I mean, I've had players that came to me when they're 13 or 14 tell me, and they're great players, but they don't have any soccer IQ, and they tell me like, "Oh, my dad said I should never pass it in front of the goal, like, or across, even if I'm, like, above the 18." I'm like, "Well, dude, have you watched a high level game before?" Like, that's what they're doing the entire game. It's about making the right decision and the timing, but I think if parents can easily, mold their kids in the wrong way. So, you gotta educate yourself, man.
Yeah, man. Hey, let me plug the master class at this point.
There
So
you go.
that is why I struggle to answer your question here because it's very difficult. There's so many factors involved. and you certainly can't answer it in a podcast episode, and a parent certainly can't absorb the richness, the complexity of the contexts to be able to give good advice. So it's like, this is a great unsolved problem. I'm going to go try and solve it. So that's what the masterclass is. It's like, go to the masterclass. It's not going to solve it either, but it will launch you on a good path. You'll get a good base level understanding. And then with that good base level of understanding, maybe you're more capable of discerning, okay, what's my next step in education? Should I go to this source, this source, this source? Should I, does X, Y, or Z know what they are talking about or not? At least you'll get a base level first filter of being able to say, nah, that article is shit. Nah, that person is full of shit. Nah, that coach doesn't know what he's doing to a certain degree, Ben. But without a good base, you are 100% blindfolded, unfortunately. You have no idea.
You know what I think is going to happen, Gary, is parents are going to go through their masterclass and they're going to recognize that, especially in a lot of areas where the game isn't that prevalent, they're going to recognize there's not many coaches out there that are doing good work, and the parents are going to end up becoming the coaches themselves, you know? Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
and yeah, go ahead.
and then that's when they sign up for the 343 coaching program, dude.
You'd be surprised how many emails I've gone over the past 12 years from coaches who are in the coaching program. And they basically say, yeah, my kids just became 8 years old or 9 years old or 10 or 7 or whatever it is. And I put them in soccer and I thought it was shocking. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to coach these guys. And
Yeah.
they formed their own team
Yep.
that's how they got started on their soccer trajectories, because they recognized everything is terrible out there. And unfortunately, I'm not trying to downplay coaches. I fight for coaches. I fight for coaches here. I really do. I advocate for them. But it's just true. 99% of coaches out there are not great. They're not doing good work, and they want to do good work, many of them, but it's just not happening. It's
Yeah.
just not right.
That's funny,
Yeah,
dude.
man. And the other thing I want to say is, like, because I thought this is where you were going. It's like, once you see something, once you see a truth, you can't unsee it. It's
Right.
over.
Right. And that's why I'm saying they're gonna see like, dude, nobody's doing this, or I shouldn't say nobody, because there are a lot of good coaches out there doing it, but majority of coaches out there aren't teaching their teams the right way, as we like to say. People will say like, "Oh, what's the right way?" To those people, I say, "You have no idea, dude." But, anyways, dude, you told me to bring up at the end USL and how that fits into this new pathway. So how does the USL fit into the path to becoming pro? Because obviously back in the day that wasn't the case.
Yeah. So we went through the whole history pathway to pro, and I was focusing on MLS because that's what everybody kind of really knows and is most mainstream. But USL, the second division in our country, the league, has become very prominent for the last handful of years. They also have a third division now, USL League One. I think they even have a lower league than that that's non-professional, but they at least have two professional tiers. And some of them have youth teams also. So you don't have to go to an MLS team or academy or farm or anything. There is an alternative. It's the USL alternative. Is it good? It's just as good as MLS, of course. You're playing youth soccer. You're probably playing youth soccer in the higher leagues. Also, I don't know if they have teams in ECNL or MLS Next. I don't know all of those ins and outs, but they do have a first team that they would like to develop talent for, and so that's a pathway to being on a professional team, whether it be USL Championship, the second division, or USL League One, the third division. And there are many benefits to going this path versus the MLS path. In the MLS path, and depending on position, in the MLS path, the probability of you earning a contract isn't great, necessarily. There's a lot of competition, more competition. The path to you, even if you earn a contract, to getting playing time, it gets reduced even more, because at the MLS level, they look for foreigners to recruit and bring in as the winger, the striker, the central midfielders, the defenders, or whatever. So you're more in a global competition for pro playing time there. Versus in USL, most everything is mostly domestic. There is no incentive for USL teams, or I'll say lesser incentive for USL teams to go out in the global marketplace and recruit players from Argentina or Brazil or whatever. And even if they do try to do that, the level of talent that they're bringing in from the outside isn't top tier either. So the probability that your kid will be successful at the pro level in USL skyrockets. And then USL does have an incentive, more so than MLS, to make that pathway to pro better than MLS because they're competing against MLS for youth talent. And they also have a much greater incentive to ship players overseas. Like we did. We started a whole thing in USL also, or contributed, I should say, to USL transferring players overseas. Look at like a Jose Gallegos at San Antonio. Did well in San Antonio as an 18-year-old, poof, out to Europe, sold to Europe, and that was along that year, other youth players in USL professional teams were being shipped overseas. And so clearly there is a pathway to the top levels of global football, not even domestic football, through the USL pipeline. So I would strongly encourage everybody to really give that consideration because they won't really put roadblocks in your way like an MLS would put roadblocks in your way. Uh, yeah, so I mean, it's an important pathway that's developed and being further developed. And now everybody understands, like how you said, apparently they're announcing they're going to do promotion relegation within USL. It's not real promotion relegation, but it's better than a totally closed shop like MLS. And that develops the pathway to pro even further.
It's going to be really cool, Gary, if these USL teams can start to implement or produce like youth academies. Because as of right now, I mean, like our local team, OCFC, I'm pretty sure that they don't have their own youth academy, but with this new, promotion relegation idea buzzing around, I can only imagine that these USL teams are now going to start to have youth academies, and hopefully the money pours in to these clubs and teams, and players can get the opportunity from the U10 age all the way a clear pathway to the first team, and maybe that's gonna maybe like players that fell through the cracks, or like you like to say, the canyons with other MLS academies or teams, maybe that gives them an opportunity to go and play. Or maybe if you live in an area where you're 1,000 miles away from the closest MLS team, then okay, do you have a USL team in your local neighborhood? There's a whole academy, a whole pathway to go. I think that'll be really cool, and I think it'll change the landscape of US soccer, hopefully.
Hopefully, man. I'll add this point as well because I know folks are well-meaning out there, but they're misguided when they say something like USL teams or any club at all, professional club, should be forced to have an academy in order to be a professional club and compete in a professional league. That is absolutely misguided. That is nonsense. That is horseshit. I am completely against it. Okay. No business should be forced to do X, Y, or operate a certain way. A professional club team, a USL team, as we're discussing here, should not be forced to have an academy or sustain youth teams or anything. Let it be a free market, for fuck's sake. Free market. If they decide that it is in their best interest to have a youth pipeline established of one flavor or another, great, they should do it. If they decide no, then they should be allowed not to do it. And the same goes for MLS and the same goes for everybody. Why are we forcing businesses to do X, Y, or Z? Let them operate as they will, and the best will survive and the worst will fail. That's it. Let it be a free market, which is why I continue saying that this proposal, whatever this proposal is, I haven't seen really anything formal, of USL having promotion relegation now between its tiers, it's not promotion and relegation. It's not an open free market. It's better than nothing. It's not a free market though.
Right. All right, Gary. I mean, you talked a lot about promotion relegation, but if you can, give me a kind of a general overview, like a 2-minute rundown of how to become a pro. You know, obviously the audience knows I'm having a kid in August. So from day one, how do I make my kid become a pro, dude? Project Mbappe, dude.
Your kid's not going to be Mbappe. He's not even born yet. And look what you're saying.
No, dude. Yeah, have you seen that thing though? It's a like an Instagram thing, and this guy
No,
like straight out of the womb, like right the minute this fool's born, this fool's putting like cleats on the baby. It's called Project. He calls it Project Mbappe. He's like the kid's like not even walking yet. This fool's like shooting balls at him. Just
that's funny.
yeah, it's funny clip. Anyways, a 2-minute. How do you become pro,
Yeah,
and what does it take?
yeah. Well, I'll put a bow tie on it. Your kid in particular already has an advantage. He's going to have a father that has played his whole life, has coached. I don't know. You're close to maybe a decade now. I don't even know. Coached at a variety of levels. Um, had Brian as a mentor for a very long time. So has a particular vision of the game for a very long time. Is connected. Certainly by the time the kid is 10, I don't know. I presume you might be involved in soccer through at least through your kid if you're not coaching or have a business in soccer or something. So you have a network to tap into and lean into. You see all the scams. You've seen all the scams, and you know how to identify the scams in the ecosystem. So all of that stuff is handled, and then obviously the kid still has to be good though, because you can have all those things and the kid sucks and he ain't going nowhere unless you happen to become a MLS franchise president or general manager or something like that. Then all of a sudden your kid can be playing on the second team and training with the first team, and you know you can still have that. So yeah, Ben, there you have it.
Well, what about for the average Joe that's not me, that doesn't have all these connections, Gary? It's somebody that's just
Make
passionate
the
about
kid
soccer. Yeah, go for it.
make the kid in quotes make right. I'm not talking about forcing him or her. Make them have a love affair with the game. And here I'll take a little snippet from Tom Byer, who has spent his decades advocating for his concept of soccer starts at home, right? That's how he titled it. And yeah, have the kid from a very early age, messing around with the ball. The kid is 2 or 3 or 4 years old, and just have them messing around with the ball at all times. Don't get mad at them when they break, the expensive china or ruin some furniture, and have them develop this relationship with the ball. That's step number one. So by the time they do enter a team environment at age 7 or 8 or 10 or 5 or whatever, they already have a huge leg up on their competition. And when you are among the best of your peer group, you tend to enjoy the thing that you're doing even more because you're good at it. You're better than your peer group. And so you as a human like that. You get dopamine hits when you're good. And if you get on that trajectory early, yeah, by the time you're 13 or 14 or something, you should continue having that leg up on people, and then your enjoyment level continues rising or is sustained because you're among the best. It's very hard if you are not among the best. If you're mediocre or at the bottom of bottom 20% or 30%, it's very difficult for those players to really enjoy themselves and be super passionate, because when you suck at something, Benny, it's not a dopamine hit. It's a drag on you, and ultimately that can lead you to quit.
Makes sense. So I don't think my kid's going pro, dude.
The probabilities are against you, buddy.
Yep. Well, hey, Gary, that's the other, just really quick, the other important thing is because a lot of kids who spend their whole life playing soccer, even if they've been really successful at the youth levels, they've made it, you know, to college, maybe they have a quick stint in USL and they don't pan out. I mean, Gary, the only skills that they have in life is soccer. They haven't, had another job. They haven't done all these other things. And so, when their career doesn't pan out, It's like, what life skills do you have, dude, to be successful in this world? That's the hard part. So it's like, if you're on that path and you've made it to your first year of being pro, it's like, dude, you better be putting everything that you possibly have into it, because if it doesn't pan out, dude, you're gonna be, I don't know, dude, working at Subway or something.
You're in big trouble, Benny. Absolutely. And insofar as your kid is concerned, who knows what the future holds? There's going to be VR like you've never seen before. So the no, I'm serious. Like there's going to be VR athletes or something. VR soccer, 11v11. Every one of the players is in a VR headset at their own house, and that's how it is from that point forward. And all of us tuning in, we have our own headsets or whatever the contraption happens to be. Maybe it's contact lenses or whatever. And that teleports us into the stadium or whatever. And you're witnessing your kid who is non athletic be the best player on Real Madrid through the VR implementation. No,
Insane.
I'm not joking. I'm being dead ass right here. Your kid is 20 years away, from being a pro, or 18 years away from being a pro. The world is completely different than what it is now. Who knows if we'll actually have live soccer the way that we have it now?
That would be sad, dude. It's sad to think of a world where that doesn't exist.
Hey, I'm sure there'll still be a world for live in the flesh sort of stuff, but everything's going to change, Benny.
It's gonna be like 11v11 Tesla bots versus fucking Metabots, dude.
No, well, I don't want to say no, but because humans want to see other humans engage, like you still want to see, you don't sit down and watch a computer chess match between two computers. That's lame and retarded. You want to see a human chess player versus another human chess player.
Right. Man, dude. I hope it never, live in the flesh sports in general, I hope it doesn't go away, but you never know.
You never know, buddy.
All right, dude. We'll have to have a whole episode on the future of soccer.
Yeah, yeah. What sucks is, well, actually, it doesn't suck, because if that's the future, I'm like, fuck yeah, I could suit up again.
There you go, dude. Become a pro VR player, dude.
Indeed.
That's insane.
Indeed, man. You already see stuff with streamers, and I mean, everything has moved digitally, and
Oh yeah.
everything that is digital has more engagement than the physical at this point. So I don't see what stops this trend.
Right. Really quick, Gary, I wanted to get your thoughts on MLS's new proposed calendar change. I mean, I don't know, 2028. Is this just kind of a move to, I'm looking for the word, a move to like one up USL and saying like, hey, look at us, we're the top league in the US. Look at us, we're on the same schedule as FIFA and other European countries. Or what is the reason for this move, and why are they announcing it right now?
The best lens to always view any decision or proposed decision or anything like this from MLS, the best lens is to understand their incentives, or their primary incentive, which is power and control. That's it. It has nothing to do with what's good for soccer itself or what's good for the constituents or nothing. It's about power and control. So if this calendar thing indeed is going to move forward, first I should say this is something that me and folks like me have been advocating for 20 years or 15 years or 10 years, and it escalated from there, that we should be on the same calendar as global football for every possible reason. One of the most ones is when you're aligned, the transfer windows are aligned, and you can participate in the global marketplace of football seamlessly, or much more seamlessly. And opponents of that, which included MLS itself, opponents would say, "Oh, Gary and so, you guys don't know what you're talking about. It's impossible to do that. This is America. We're different than the rest of the world. We have other sports to take into consideration, because they look at it as a competition for attention with the other sports. And that's only true for the demographic that is non-soccer first here in this country, and not the soccer first households in this country. Topic aside, they would say that, and they would also say, "Oh, well, how are you going to play in Minnesota? You know, first off, Minnesota wasn't even in the picture when we started advocating for these things, but they'll cite the weather thing. Hey, the weather isn't cooperative, you know, for the northern latitudes and stuff. I'm like, okay, so how does Russia do it in the snow, and how does Germany do it in the snow, and how does, you know, Sweden and all the Nordic countries do it, Denmark, etc. It's doable, okay, one way or another. And so now all of a sudden 180 degrees flip. Now MLS and all the guys who are anti us, you know, are saying, oh yeah, this is great, we should move to the international calendar, this is the proper move, MLS should do it before 2028, they should do it for 2026 and capture the momentum of the World Cup. So funny how things work out, right? Everybody's always 10 years behind, 5, 10, 15 years behind the people at the bleeding edge already. Their opinions, it takes them 10 years to catch up with us. And then as to why they're doing it, Ben, I think along with promotion relegation for USL, I think the American public, their education level has accelerated the past 5 years or so, to the point where more and more people are educated on the global game, on football itself, on the mechanisms themselves, to the point that they start recognizing how inauthentic MLS is and how much of a scam, you know, much of it is and the ecosystem is. And they themselves are stopping to pay attention. They're not paying as much attention to Major League Soccer anymore. So MLS is being forced to comply now. They're being forced to say, okay, fuck it, like, we have to do this now. Before they were forced to comply and playing the homegrowns, and then they were forced to comply and transferring homegrowns to Europe, and now they're being forced to comply to the international calendar because of the education of the public. And eventually, if we keep this up and the public keeps up with their learning, eventually they're going to have to comply to an open system, or they're toast. That's my optimistic view.
We got to keep pushing for it then. It seems like the MLS always responds to, public perception and, you know, outrage. So, hopefully,
1,000,000%.
yeah, hopefully in the next, I don't know. What do we have to do, Gary? You have to fucking riot on the street or what?
No, just keep,
What are the
no,
fans do?
all of us have to, yeah, all of us just have to keep doing what we're doing, is learning, and getting outside of the mainstream monopolized American soccer media. Get away from these guys. Don't listen to a goddamn thing that's coming out of like MLSsoccer.com. They're obviously an MLS media outlet. Okay. Those people are not journalists. Okay. And get out of all the other mainstream, quote unquote, journalists bubble, because they're all compromised. They all bow down and spread the narratives that the monopoly tells them to spread. So you have to remove yourself from that shit and start listening to the independent voices, start listening to the global marketplace of ideas, and then things are going to change, man. That's what's caused change to this date, and that is what will continue to cause change in the future. One more thing, because I know all the arguments. I know all the arguments better than they know their own arguments. One in particular. Oh no, Gary, you're going to go to the international calendar because, yeah, it's better for the transfer market. They're going to be able to sell more players. You know, they're going to be able to bring in more players. That's not why they're fucking, if they do it, that's not why they're going to do it. Owners don't give a shit about selling a player for $6 million overseas, or it being easier to sell a player for $6 million overseas, or 10 million, or 2 million, or 20 million. That is a inconsequential drop in the monetary bucket. That is not the business model of Major League Soccer. The business model for these owners is you have a limited supply that they control. They have a monopoly on the top tier of the game. And all you have to do is hold on to the asset for an extended period of time, and the asset value is going to increase over time. $6 million means nothing. If you look at the asset values of, say, Toronto FC, whenever Toronto FC was admitted into the league, I don't remember when it was, 2010 or something on that order, maybe 15 years ago, I don't know. It was purchased for like $70 million, supposedly, reportedly, because you actually don't know. It's a private company, Ben, Major League Soccer. You're only saying what the reports say. So nobody knows what Toronto FC was, the franchise rights were sold for. Let's say it's accurate, 70 million. Right now, it might be worth 700 million or 500 million or 300 or whatever it is. Look at the appreciation in the asset value. It has nothing to do because they are a good soccer club and they won championships and they have global attention, or their broadcasting rights are huge, or because they sold a player for $6 million or $20 million. No, they appreciated from $70 million purchasing price to $500 million or $750 million valuation now, a 10x investment in 10 years or 15 years, simply by sitting and squatting on the asset. So the winner, the calendar being changed to the global calendar has zero to do with making money.
It's all about the interest of MLS, dude, and preserving the power, like you said.
All right, man. I'll stop there. I get a little passionate and worked up. But last time we spoke, I said, hey, this is what the people want. They want you to trigger me.